Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Up Close on METV. I'm Charles Clapsaddle, Station Manager for Manatee Educational Television. And on this special edition of Up Close, we're very pleased to have with us Wayne Soares. Wayne, thank you very much for joining us today, and I can't wait to talk about some of the great things that you're doing.
Well, my pleasure, Charles. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Wayne is an author, educator, stand-up comedian, and entertainer whose own life experiences have led him on a mission to improve lives, enhance communication, and crash through barriers. His career spans nearly 3 decades in broadcasting as an on-air announcer for ESPN Radio, the New York Mets, and WEEI Sports Radio. Wayne is a voiceover specialist and having lent his talents from commercials to cartoons, and is currently on an international tour to U.S. military bases around the globe. Now, as an author, Soares has penned 3 books: The Power of Words and Actions, Are You a Good Sport, and The Big Game. And Wayne's also going to talk to us about his anti-bullying initiatives here in Manatee County and around the country. Wayne, I'm not sure we can fit everything here into a 30-minute program, but it's such a pleasure having met you to talk about the wide variety of work that you've been doing. But one of the key things that I'd like for you to take a moment or two about is to talk about your work with the armed forces and how long you've been doing it and how did you get involved in that?
Well, first of all, Charles, thank you very much for that. And let me just say God bless our United States military, because they're the brave men and women that keep our country safe and allow us to do the things that, we enjoy. I became involved with doing stuff for the military probably about 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. Very good friend of mine, former Oakland Raider football player, Otis Sistrunk. And a little trivia, Otis and I have the same birthday, and our mothers shared the same birthday as well. So for the trivia buffs out there, I mean, it's a perfect segue. But Otis and I do a lot of charity golf tournaments together. Mm-hmm. And we were at a charity golf tournament for the Special Olympics. And I said to him, hey, can I get out to Joint Base Lewis McChord, which is where he works. He's the manager of Cowan Stadium, which is a massive stadium that they have out there to do a bunch of events. And that's in Fort Lewis, Washington. Right. And he put it together. And I was out there 4 years ago for Armed Forces Day, and it was my first gig, and it was so enlightening to be able to speak and inspire and motivate and bring some laughter to our wounded warriors. I did a lot of military hospitals out there, and it was great, and I had a chance to entertain our troops as well and our airmen. But the thing that really impacted me the most, Charles, was going into a military hospital. And the program coordinator, wonderful, wonderful man who spent 3 tours of duty in Iraq, a gentleman by the name of Amin Areola. And he said to me, you cannot get emotional when you come in to our hospitals. These wounded warriors, these people, these great men and women, they don't want any sympathy. They want laughter. And they want you not to feel sorry for them, but to bring them laughter. So that's all you had to tell me. And I walk in. Ladies and gentlemen, great to be here.
Yeah, well, how you doing?
Don't get up. And just from there, bing, bang, boom, joke, 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 laugh, laugh, laugh. And it was wonderful. And the main thing about our men and women in the service, in our military, and our wounded warriors, all they want is a simple thank you. They're not looking for any backslapping or headlines or whatever it is. Just thank you. And I've been very, very, very fortunate to be on my own personal tour around the world. And I was in Afghanistan this past August, and had a chance to go ahead and entertain our troops about 5 miles from the border.
That had to be a sobering experience.
Well, when a Marine colonel comes up to you and says, son, we'd like you to go to, the front. And I kind of laughed it off. I said, yeah, right.
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
Okay. He said, son, our boys, men and women out there would really appreciate, he said, a little bit of laughter and inspiration. And that's all you had to tell me. And so we take off, and, we've got an MV with a gun turret in front of us, one in the back, and we're in the middle. And we got there, and it was a tactical base. And I was 7 minutes into my speech, 1,500 Marines. They're all with guns, and all of a sudden a bomb goes off. Now, if you've ever heard a bomb, it could have been 500 miles away, it could have been 5 miles away, and I froze on stage for like 7 seconds. And I had to do something to get the crowd.
It's pretty normal.
And I had to do something to get the crowd back, and because everybody was looking at me like this. And I looked at my watch. I said, "Geez, I didn't think my ex-wife knew I was in Afghanistan." And it just brought relaxed everybody and brought it back, and that was it. But again, all these brave, our boys, our men and women, all they wanted to do is they wanted to engage afterwards, and they crowded around me. It was one of the most inspirational things for me personally.
Yeah. It's got to be so rewarding to have that kind of camaraderie with those people that put their life on the line each and every day. And to have that touch of home really makes a difference. To have somebody who's coming all that distance to make their day just a little bit better. And I salute you for doing that, not only in Afghanistan and around the world, but here at home. When you go into a hospital, Wayne, it's personally, when you see the extent of injuries and the depression that you see there, to be able to make their life a little bit better, it's a great task, and you're really to be saluted for that.
Well, I thank you, and you're very kind in that. But our real heroes are the men and women that serve us and protect us. And I've had some great inspiration from my personal friend, John Saputo, who was a Marine Corps retired. Colonel Saputo, yes, exactly. And he's been wonderful, absolutely wonderful to me, and he's been so supportive and inspiring. And we had a situation. I was in Rhine Main Air Force Base right before the holidays, and I had gone into a military hospital, and I had seen this young private who had a New York Rangers jersey on, and I said, "Geez, wow." I said, "Boy, I'm from Massachusetts, and
right.
Bruins fan and everything." And I said, "Matter of fact, Nick Fotillo," I said, "former Ranger tough guy, is a good friend of mine." And the kid looked at me, he said, "That's my father's favorite player. Mickey was great." Oh, I said, "Well, you know what?" I said, "I will go ahead." I said, "And I'll get you a puck from him and a picture. I'll send it to you." I went back to see him the next day. Third day I went back to see him. It was an empty bed. And I kind of put two or two together. I asked the nurse. Well, he had passed away during the course of the night. And we lost another, brave warrior. But Colonel Saputo was extremely helpful to me that's never happened to me before. And that night I had to go out and entertain. You had to go out and be funny,
right,
and put that behind you. And he was just a great inspiration, and he's a wonderful man, and I thank him very much.
And he continues to be very supportive of veterans, not only here throughout Manatee and Sarasota County, but throughout the world. And you're right, he does a great deal. But Wayne, and I want to come back to your work with wounded warriors and troops around the world. But for those people that aren't familiar with your work, you have a wide and varied background. You're coming from Massachusetts, around the Cape, and you went into sports announcing, and from sports announcing you got stand-up. How did this all evolve? Where did you find the time to put all this together?
Well, I'm a genius. I don't know if you knew that, Charles.
Well, I think that's on your card, isn't it?
No, it's more like flip it over, it says knucklehead. But I've been very... my grandmother was my idol. She raised me. My grandparents both were my inspiration. And when you grow up without a father, you're somewhat driven always. And my grandparents, and especially my grandmother, they really instilled some great values in me of character and perseverance and determination. And I've always kind of held that close to me. And I wanted to be a sportscaster. Started out, and I was going to be, the next Howard Cosell, for those of us that remember
Howard Cosell.
and then along the way, I kind of got a little, I wanted to go into radio. And I did some local radio, did some radio in Boston, and then I got a job at ESPN. In between that, I actually went out to Hollywood. I was a Hollywood publicist for 3.5 years for the great Lee Salters.
Oh, really?
Who's no longer with us, but handled some great accounts, handled Frank Sinatra, the Backstreet Boys were back then. We handled Natalie Cole, Michael Jackson, and he had an opportunity to work on those, and my all-time favorite comic of all time, Milton Berle. And I was, the first night I met him, I said, "Mr. Berle, I'm Wayne Soares." He said, "Who cares?" And, but no, he didn't say that. He was great. He was wonderful. And to meet people like Don Rickles, I mean, icons. And it was a great experience, but LA is not for everybody, and it certainly wasn't for me. So I came back and really tried to work, my behind off and getting into ESPN. That was the thing,
the pinnacle
for me to do. And it took me about 4 years to get in. And I remember the day, it was a Friday, and I had written letters and sent in tapes, and I finally, it was a rainy day outside, and I said, I'm going to give this one more shot. It's 5:15, and I picked up the phone, and I didn't get the secretary. I got the VP of broadcasting. And he said to me, because I must have been a pain in the behind to him, because he kept seeing these things from Soares. "Why do you want to work here, Wayne? Tell me in 30 seconds. I'm running out. I got to meet my wife for dinner, and I haven't seen my kid in 2 days." And I told him in 30 seconds or less, "You'll never, ever be embarrassed about hiring me. You'll never regret it. I will work when people don't work." And I kept my promise. And I worked Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, Thanksgiving, Easter. And I had a great run. I had a great run of 10 years, met some wonderful, wonderful people, had an opportunity to introduce, to interview, just all the great athletes.
And that's a mark of a true professional, and getting into the business is just dedication, perseverance, and just an endurance to keep going. Now, when you're at ESPN, sports, is the lifeblood of this country. I mean, you can't find one person in a room who's not a sports fanatic. Is there a moment that you remember during your career that you think, I've got this?
I really, to talk about some of the people that I met there who were the great impacts with me. My first day there working, here comes Robin Roberts, who was one of my all-time idols. She's a better person than she is an on-air personality. And 4 hours later, in comes my idol, Chris Berman.
Really?
The Boomer comes in, and I was like, "Mr. Berman," and he's like, "Hey kid, how are you?" The big booming, "Hey, how you doing, kid?" And but very, very, very classy people. And Chris Berman taught me a great lesson. He said, after I got to know him, and we did a couple of golf tournaments together and so forth, and he did my radio show, and he said, "Who's the first people that you say hi to when you come in the morning?" And I said, "Well, the person at the front desk, sometimes the maintenance person is." He said, "Good. Always, always say hi to those people."
That's a great
because
idea.
those are the people that are going to help you out.
It's true.
Those are the people. Ed Lauder, greatest. Alfred Hitchcock called him the greatest character actor of his generation.
And you and Ed, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, are great friends, have been known each other for how many years now?
15.
That's great.
And he gave me the wonderful advice, and we'll talk about the movies and so forth, but Ed said, when you go in, I said, "What do you do?" As I'm acting, and he said, "Always come in, say hi to the people behind the camera.
Sure.
Say hi to, the cinematographers, say hi to the grips, because they're the people that can make you look good."
And that's great
and show them respect, and you know what? And they'll make you look good. And I said, "Ed, it's tough to make a guy that looks like Shrek look good." But any event. It's great advice from Ed Lauder.
Now, from the early sports announcing days and sports radio and the tremendous success that you had at ESPN, you've developed, like a persona because you wanted to go on to other things, and you got into comedy, and comedy is like a tough profession. I mean, it's a really tough profession. It's not for the faint of heart. How did you get involved in that?
Well, like anybody, when I first started out,
I wanted to do everything.
Oh, people say, "Well, how much can you do?" "Oh, I can do 10 minutes.
Right.
10 minutes? You can do 10 minutes. How long you been in comedy? "Oh, 2 months." You can't. silence in comedy is like silence on the radio. It is painful. It's like silence on TV, you know?
Right.
And they said, well, if you can do 2 to 3 minutes, that's great. Work on that. And it's a very good friend of mine, comedian Jeff Cesario, Emmy award-winning writer also out in Hollywood. He said, just work on 2 to 3 minutes and package that and then grow to 5 minutes or whatever. And my first event that I did was in Providence, Rhode Island. I was nervous. And I didn't really have an act. I did some imitations, or
Right.
I, said something, or made fun of a political, figure or whatever it was, and just kind of went along. But Jeff Cesario, people like Lenny Clark,
Right.
really, really, really taught me, how to be a comedian.
Technique.
And technique, and to work at it. And when you're done with your gig, don't hang around, because the rookies hang around. They want to say, people, you're really funny. Well, what am I supposed to be? How am I supposed
That's
to?
right. Yeah.
Or people come up to you and they say, you were really funny. I said, well, thank you. I didn't mean to disappoint. But it's you have to learn your craft and learn your timing, and you really have to work at it. And when you leave a gig, go home and make your notes.
Right.
What did I do well? What didn't I do well? And just really kind of grow with it and work at your craft.
And as part of that, from your radio announcing days, working as a comedian, you've developed kind of that persona of where you had a message that you needed to get out. And I really do think it's important, and I think it's important for our audience to know too, that you are considered like a nationally known inspirational speaker, and you've done this throughout the country for the highest Fortune 500 companies, for government agencies, which I think is really, because you can bring that brand of comedy and sports knowledge, and put that into something that's really going to motivate and inspire audiences and workforce and a whole variety of employees. So tell us a little bit how you got into that business as well.
Well, it was funny. When I was at ESPN, I was asked to be a guest speaker in my hometown at a Little League banquet. And I just got up and I spoke from the heart. I talked about growing up without a dad, and talked about achieving and doing the best that you can. And somebody came up to me afterwards and said, boy, you really did a good job. And I said, well, thank you. No. They said, you should really get into this. And I said, oh, no, I mean, I'm a sportscaster. I'm not a speaker. And then I just got asked to do a couple more. I think the first year I did like 4 appearances. Next year I did like 14. After that, I was doing regularly, 75, 80 gigs a year. And
that's a lot.
100, I think we did 157, last year. And my message, it's really the same in when I speak to kids as it is to corporations, but you have to add obviously the the bells and whistles when you speak corporately. But it's the main rule is treat others the way you want to be treated.
Right.
And when you're a leader, don't be in the ivory tower. You have every day you have an opportunity to impact people in your organization. When you think that you deserve a raise, give it. When you think somebody would you be reprimanded, then reprimand somebody. But never reprimand somebody in your face, screaming, yelling. That has absolutely no place.
Right.
And there's the old adage, Charles, where you catch. My grandmother was famous of saying this. You catch more, bees with honey than you do with vinegar.
Right.
And if you're going to constantly embarrass and denigrate somebody, when it comes crunch time, especially in corporations, they're not going to go to the wall for you. They're just going to give you lip service and not. And I just think that in our society today, I think rather than trying to, we microwave stuff rather than trying to crock pot it.
It's very true.
And I asked a very dear friend of mine who's very wealthy and successful and was one of the founder of D'Angelo's, which is back in Massachusetts. It's a huge sub-chain. And I said, what's your key to being successful? And he said, I'll give you 2 words of advice. Number 1, hang around with successful people, get to know them, study them, ask them questions, go out to lunch with them, pick their brains. The second is, read The Tortoise and the Hare. And I said, what are you talking about? Tortoise and the Hare? I said, I read it as a kid, but if you look at that example, we're a society full of hares. We're just, bing, bing, we're always going.
That's right.
Slow and steady wins the race.
It's one of my favorite sayings.
And that was a great minds think alike.
Yeah, I guess so. But you know, I can see how thoroughly and in depth you can bring your life experience and kind of translate that to an audience that really needs a motivation. It really needs to kind of have an insight that perhaps they don't see in that day-to-day grind. So I can see that the success that you bring to that motivational speaking around the country and around the world has been great success for you.
Well, thank you, and I really appreciate it. It's a great feeling when you get up in front of, 7,500 troops, or you get up in front of 500 people at a convention, and you can bring a message of inspiration and motivation that will impact people. And I think that every day, every one of us has an opportunity to leave someone with something in a positive sense.
And I think that's a part of the message that you're bringing to schools right now, and I want to take a minute about that. But I want to talk to you a little bit about your involvement with some great people in the world of cinema. You mentioned Ed Lauter before, and those people who don't know about Ed Lauter is a well-respected, well-known character actor and has been so for many, many years. And you've also had a great relationship with other people in the film business. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was really was blessed to meet a gentleman 15 years ago, Ed Lauter. And for those of us that are of the age, we remember him as the captain of the guards in The Longest Yard.
Great role. And
it really was. And he studied, and he's been so helpful in terms of learning the craft. And I was fortunate, my person represented me at the time, who is now a circuit judge, Judge John F. Lakin, and who's become a great confidant and really kind of pushed me and motivated me to get into this role of a nightclub owner. And the movie was Blind Pass, directed by, right here in Sarasota, by the great Steve Titone. And Ed was in the movie, as was Armand Asante. And Chris McKenna, outstanding actress, Danielle White.
Correct.
And there's a great story behind Danielle and I meeting, and I'll share that with you if we have time. But when you have a chance, John and his brother Kenny, who have represented me and continue to do so, they set up a meeting in New York City with Armand Asante. And it was great just to be able to when you say Armand Asante, I mean, 15 women in a restaurant, they faint. Like, oh, boom. And so I had a chance to sit down and to really kind of pick his brain on characters and how you prepare for a role. And Ed's always a phone call away. And Ed is a guy that always returns a phone call. Armand with a note. Directors like Steve Titone, very, very, very helpful. I spent 3.5 hours with him yesterday talking about a variety of projects, and he's he's a creative genius, and he's so very helpful. And it's just been great in the infancy of what I do. But again, Steve, just like Armand and Ed, get out there, work, whether you're doing Playhouse, work in small theaters, whatever it is.
Independent film, all of those things.
Just get out there and work and learn the craft. And that's why you have guys like Asante, who just is so professional on a set, as is Ed. And they're great people.
Well, I can see, being, teamed and knowing these people and having those life experiences, partnered with all the things that you bring to a role. Your background in sports, your motivation, all of these things are kind of key to developing this outreach that you continue to do, not only with troops, but in the community as well. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, which I think is a very important thing, and it's a national epidemic, if you want to call it that, is bullying. And one of the things that you've undertaken, which again, hats off to you, Wayne, for doing so, is you've dedicated a good portion of your time and effort to an anti-bullying campaign. Recently you've been here in Manatee County talking to some schools about anti-bullying. Why is that important to you, and why do you think that's necessary?
Well, it's a real it hits home with me, Charles, because I was bullied as a young kid in growing up without a father, being raised by grandparents. There's a lot of verbal abuse that I took on as a child in the elementary school, maybe up till 5th grade, and then as I got a little bit bigger, and the bully stayed the same. Well, they kind of backed off. And I always made it my mission in life, and not to be like Wayne Soares is, he's this guy with there's the white flag and everything like that. But it's no fun when you get bullied at all. Nobody likes to. I mean, I'm 6'4", 250 pounds, and all right, 260, and give or take, right? Nobody, even now, nobody likes to be made fun of or be snickered at. And it's my message today, and I just want to kind of talk a little bit about that. I had a wonderful 3 presentations today at St. Stephen's.
Great school.
It was fabulous. The kids there were just unbelievable. They were attentive and receptive. We had just a wonderful time, and that was orchestrated by a good friend of mine, Andre Perron, who's a local attorney here, as well as my main sponsor, who is just another wonderful person. I don't want to overuse the word wonderful, but he is Zach Callis, and Zach's a local businessman. Judge Lakin, John Lakin, was instrumental laying the groundwork years ago, and a gentleman who really got behind this recently. And he took time out of his schedule today to come to Ballard Elementary School, where I was this afternoon, and that's Mayor Poston.
Wayne Poston.
And he showed up, and he was so supportive. But it was a great experience today. Wendy Mangillo down at the Ballard Elementary School, those kids were fabulous, as were the kids at St. Stephen's. So my message is to the kids: if you sit by and you sit back and you watch somebody get verbally or physically abused, you're just as guilty as the bully. So take action. Doesn't have to be physical, but take action with the power of your words, with your actions. And you need to step in and do something about it. And it's I do a skit where I ask a child to count 20 seconds. And it usually ends up to 20 seconds. With the younger kids, it gets up to, 30 or 40 seconds. But the message is, it takes 20 seconds to be kind to someone, to say something nice, to make an impact on them. And I tell the story, and it's in my book, The Power of Your Words and Actions, I had a Major League Baseball player for the Red Sox who was my hero. And I met him, I missed an autograph signing that I was at, he was scheduled to be at, and I finally caught him in a restaurant, all by himself. I went up to him, and I was just in awe. And I asked him, what's the best way to hit a curveball? And he was eating, and he looked at me and said, with a bat, kid. And just went back to eating again. And my point, I'm 48 years old. That was 11. I was 11 at the time. And I was humiliated. I was frightened. And when young kids, I tell it to young kids, and sometimes they roar, ha, 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 that's so great. But you know what? When somebody you're looking up to is already a giant, and they use that type of tone to you.
Right. It's devastating.
Here is perfect word, devastating. Here's a person, whether he's a pro athlete or not, this is a grown adult that has a chance to make an impact on a young kid that he will carry with him for the rest of his life. And he throws it away because he's too busy, and he's arrogant, and he talks down. And that's one girl today, she was a Yankee fan at Ballard Elementary, and she asked me, I'm sorry, at St. Stephen's, and she said, who's your favorite player for the Yankees? And I said, without question, Derek Jeter. And she said, why? I said, because I've been around him, and I've watched him with kids, I've watched him with people. He talks to you. He doesn't talk at you. And there's a big difference. So I'm just thrilled. I've been all over the country, and I enjoy what I do. I have a tremendous passion for this. And like my website says, my Facebook, bullying is not cool. Yeah. It just isn't cool at all.
Well, I want to suggest to our audiences that they find out a little bit more about all that you have to offer by either going to your website or on your Facebook page and seeing the scope of things that you're involved in. I think that your efforts on behalf of our wounded warriors and your efforts now in working with young people about anti-bullying are really to be commended, Wayne. I mean, it's a huge undertaking. A lot of people pay lip service to it. And we got to do something about bullying, or this couldn't stand, or we should do something for our troops. Very few people can actually say that they're making the effort to try to do something to stem that tide. I can only imagine the first time you stepped into a hospital, when you saw, men and women, in varying degrees of injury sitting there, and what that meant to you, and the laughter and the joy that you brought to them. You're really to be commended upon that. And the bullying thing is important. It is an epidemic around the country, not only in Manatee and Sarasota County, but around the country. And it needs to be addressed. And I think the younger that you can get to people, I think the better it is. And I'm also very interested in seeing how you're going to continue on with your acting career too, because I think you can bring a lot to a lot of characters. When you have a coach like Ed Lauder giving you some helpful hints, perhaps.
There's nothing like it. It's the best. I mean, all you need is Mr. Rourke from Fantasy Island, and you're all set. And
so what's next for you? What's on the agenda? What do you see on the horizon for Wayne Soares?
Well, I think there's going to be another project that I hope to be involved with Steve Titone. Mm-hmm. There is a potential of my auditioning for another project in the Boston area of a sports nature. And just continue. I'd love to. Mr. Callis, my sponsor, as well as the mayor, they're going to be working to bring me back.
I think it's important.
In next month, and I'm doing a major TV show out in Seattle for teen issues with Kim Kelly, who's a personality out there, and just continuing this is a very hot topic right now, and continuing to spread the message of anti-bullying, and that's pretty much it. I'm coming out with my 4th book next month, Stories That Make a Difference, and I'm excited about it. It's good. It's another book where hopefully people can take the stories and go out and inspire and motivate people.
Now, do you have any spare time at all to do anything? Because between the military thing and the bullying and the inspirational speech, do you have a couple of minutes to yourself sometimes?
I do. It's not really to myself, but my 2 boys are 23 and 21, and my daughter is 13. So everything is really, it's around my schedule. Especially now with my daughter who's in junior high school. It's a very big age, so there's always time. I always make time to spend, with my children and with my family, because that's the most important thing. And if you asked my daughter when she was 3 years old, and I said to her, Jessie, what's the most important thing in life? And she looked at me and said, family, Daddy. So
couldn't ask for more than that.
You couldn't ask for anything better.
So Wayne, I want to thank you very much for taking time. I know you have a tremendously busy schedule to come and spend a few minutes with us and talk about the great things that you're doing around the country. And I would like to suggest too that if you have the time to come back, perhaps you would like to host a program here where you can talk about bullying with maybe some teenagers or some family members and about the importance. I think your involvement would be critical.
It would be better than me going to the Oscars.
Well,
I thank you very much for that. I really do. That's
Wayne,
great.
Thank you again for being here, and I look forward to having you back and perhaps another time.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne.
Great.
And thank you for joining us on this special edition of Up Close on METV.